What is up, my beautiful people? Today we are going to be ranking JoJo Part 4 stands. If you haven't already seen my JoJo Part 3 tier maker, I'll put a little pop-up right now. Make sure to give that a watch, it was really interesting, maybe some controversial picks, we'll see. Leave your comments down below and tell me. Anyway, let's get into this. So the first off, we've got Acton Baby, and Acton Baby for me is probably going to be a D tier. Obviously, stand user's very young, you know, like, what, 6 months old, wasn't she? She was incredibly young. We don't know the full extent of her powers. We know she makes things invisible and she can make surrounding area invisible, which is, it's kind of cool, so it's not F tier, but I don't know, we would have to see more, hopefully, in the future. Araki will make more, but we doubt after what happened in part 6, not talking about spoilers. Next we have Aqua Necklace. Aqua Necklace for me is it's going to be about midway point, C tier or something. In my opinion, Aqua Necklace is just like a really bad get from part 3. It does pretty much all the same things, but just not as effectively. Next we have Atom Heart Father, which for me is D tier. Just really wasn't that interesting of a stand, really. You can live in a photograph and like control anything that's in view of that photograph, but he's stuck in the photograph and, you know, he can only control a certain small area. I think it's just so limited. Next we have Bad Company. We didn't see much of Bad Company, but I actually really like this stand. I'm probably going to put it up in a B tier. You're probably going to disagree with me, but it's definitely a strength in numbers sort of thing, and you know, if 1 or 2 of the units get hurt, it doesn't necessarily affect the user, so that's quite good for a user standpoint. Also, I think it's quite powerful. Like I say, we didn't really see it because he was fighting Josuke when we saw him, so you know, it's kind of a hard match to beat with Crazy Diamond, who we'll see where I put later. But yeah, Bad Company, such an interesting stand, so cool. I think it's got to be B tier. Next we have Boy to Man. Boy to Man is it's a really good stand on paper. I just don't like the conditions for him to use his ability. I think the fact that he can take the powers of other stands is, you know, it's insane. That's so overpowered, it's so strong, but I suppose it was kind of nerfed with, you've got to challenge someone to a game of rock, paper, scissors, and you've actually got to win 3 times out of the 5, which, you know, law of averages isn't that good really, but it's a good stand, but you know, great ability, just it's way too limited in how he's going to use it. Next we have Cheap Trick, and Cheap Trick is another one. I see a lot of this with part 4 stands. They've got abilities that, you know, if used correctly, they are like insanely like S tier, like mega awesome, could beat the world and Star Platinum and all that, but they're also just so limited. Like Cheap Trick as a stand, you got to think a stand works in conjunction with his user, and everything about Cheap Trick goes against his user. You know, he kills his user if you can see the back, if someone else sees their back, because then he transfers over to someone else. So it's quite, you know, it's a bad stand in that way. Anubis from part 3 was a lot better. Obviously he didn't really care for his users either, but you know, I think Anubis from part 3 was a much better version of this. I'm going to put Cheap Trick in F because, like I say, it just, part of a stand, like the appeal of a stand is, you know, what it does to protect its user, and Cheap Trick does none of that. Next we have Cinderella. Cinderella is another one. I thought it was a really cool stand, and the episode it was in was super fun, and I thought it was cool. And also the name Cinderella, you know, from the hair metal band of the 80s is awesome, to be honest, but in terms of, you know, the rest of these stands, it's got to be an F tier. No offense, Cinderella, I thought you were a cool stand. Next we have Crazy Diamond. I mean, yeah, I don't think a lot of people can argue with me that he's an S tier stand. You know, he's basically on the level of Star Platinum in speed and power, and you know, the creative ways Josuke can use his ability to destroy and reform things, you know, it's absolutely insane. It's, you know, it would be a tough battle if you stuck Star Platinum and Crazy Diamond against one another, you know. And if you watch my last video, my part 3 tier, I put the World and Star Platinum at S tier, so I think Crazy Diamond deserves to be S tier. Next we have Earth, Wind and Fire, a stand that is not a stand that everyone keeps arguing about online. Is it really a stand? We don't know, but here we're classing it as a stand. Earth, Wind and Fire for me is, like I say, this is the problem with part 4. There's not as many stands as part 3, but I think they're all super cool, but probably not all necessarily useful. Earth, Wind and Fire for me, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate. It's like a D tier for me, Earth, Wind and Fire. Because it's cool that he can transform into anything he wants, but he can't really transform into anything that would put out any sort of damage. Like, he can't turn into dynamite, he can't turn into, a weapon of any kind. He just kind of turns into, fun things like dice and shoes, but I don't think it's completely useless. That's why he's not in F tier, but I don't know, I just don't think he's all that useful. Next we have Echoes. We're going to class all 3 acts of Echoes here, or 4 if you class the egg. I don't really class the egg, I class acts 1, 2 and 3. Controversially, I think the best form of Echoes was probably actually Act 2, because it still had decent range and his ability was a lot stronger. Obviously Act 3's free freeze, that's kind of hard to say. Act 3's free freeze, no doubt it's quite a strong ability, but because his range got nerfed so much, I don't think his ability is good enough to warrant that such short range. Obviously what we're going to see in a few time with Highway Star is a much stronger stand in terms of power, and still has incredible range. I just think Echoes lacks the range now, especially in Act 3, and his ability is not that strong, so for that I'm gonna put Echoes in a B tier. Next we have Enigma, which was such a cool episode in part 4, where you can seal people within paper. The downside to that is it relies on the stand user to be able to identify his target's kind of twitch or tick or whatever you want to call it, like whatever little thing they do when they are scared, be it like they twitch their eye or they like, and for some people it can be kind of hard to identify. I mean, look at JoJo's, man's like he's a brick, he shows no emotions whatsoever. And like I say, if your stand user wasn't an expert of identifying things like that, and you've got to do it on the second time, it's not after the first time they identify, you've got to then scare them again to then get it. But I suppose the ability does also mean that, as soon as they notice that, you've been trapped in paper and you can't get out of it. So, it's not a completely useless stand, but I also don't think it's an amazing stand, so I'm going to put it in C tier. Next we have Harvest. Harvest I'm going to put in B tier along with Bad Company. Very similar to Bad Company, but Harvest has more numbers, but I think with the more numbers they do lack the firepower of Bad Company. But I do kind of like these kind of like horde stands, if you want to call them that, like stands that are more than just one entity. They're like a collection because they do great support for the user. Like if you take out just 1 or 2 of them, you're not going to deal any damage to the user. You're going to have to take out a considerable chunk, and I think it's just a case of strength in numbers. Obviously on an individual basis they are kind of weak, but I mean, like I say, strength in numbers, you can get easily overwhelmed by Harvest. It completely covers your body, and like it showed with Kira, he could have easily just started biting blood vessels and veins and stuff like that, and you wouldn't have been much use against Harvest. So yeah, B tier I think is fair. Next we have Heaven's Door. Heaven's Door is going straight in S tier. Heaven's Door is a damn good stand. It's so strong, such a good stand. The fact that, what is it, is if he just locks eyes with you, you just freeze up, and then he can just completely rewrite your life, basically. You can write instructions in you, could write you can't, attack Rohan Kishibe, you can't use your stand against Rohan, he just makes anyone, let's say it was Rohan versus Dio, he could just like, the world can't attack me, Dio can't attack me, nothing can be done against me, and then you've won. They can't do anything against you, and it's like shown that there's anything that can stop that. There's nothing that would, it's no case of like Hierophant Green where they always said no one could deflect Emerald Splash and then like 5 people deflected. Literally with Heaven's Door, no one has been able to stop his ability, so he's got to be an S tier. It's such a strong stand. Next we have Highway Star. I'm such a big fan of Highway Star. I think it's such a cool stand. The fact that it just tracks you down, like you can't hide anywhere, and that paired up with like incredible range, especially for a stand this strong, because it puts out good chunk of damage and it can break its own body down so you can't damage it. And the fact that, well, we don't really know its range. We know it could have covered the whole of Morio, and we don't know how big that place was, but yeah, incredibly strong stand. And for a stand of that sort of power to have that much range, it's got to be A tier. Next we have Killer Killer Queen is probably hands down. I've watched 5 parts of JoJo's so far. Well, I'm halfway through part 5 as I'm recording this. Killer Queen has got to be my favourite stand so far. It's got to be S tier, especially with the evolution of. Have we really known a stand to have that many like sub abilities? Like, it's just crazy that it's, you know, he has anything he touches turns into a bomb, which on its own is crazy strong. Then you add sheer heart attack and another one bites the dust on top of that, and you've got like a borderline invincible stand, you know. Killer Queen is S tier. You know, if I could do a double S, I probably could, but then I'd feel bad for Crazy Diamond. Killer Queen is just the cream of the crop. It's the best stand. Next we have Love Deluxe. Love Deluxe for me, it's an okay stand. I'll put it in C tier. I feel a bit bad if I dropped it down to D. We've seen it's decent offensively. Obviously it gave Koichi a run for its money, but that was when Echoes was quite weaker. But I don't think it's a completely useless stand. I think it's got its benefits. It's quite a flexible stand in terms of what it can do. You know, it can, because its hair, it can kind of morph into anything. It's sort of not like an object, but it can kind of weave around and it can do a multitude of stuff. So I don't think it's completely useless, but it's obviously not the strongest stand out there. I don't think it wouldn't beat anything above it, but I think it could, you know, beat the stuff below it. So C tier. Next we have Pearl Jam, and I hate to do this because it's like a similar situation with Cinderella, but more so with put Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam is such a cool stand, and its episodes are just fantastic. The fact that it can just inhabit really good food and it can heal you. Like, they always say good food can heal a broken soul or whatever. I know we're getting really deep into it now, but I mean, like, this literally heals you, like, you know, tooth decay or, you know, bad organs or whatever. You even caught yourself, you know, could be dying, serve you up a steak and then you just get revived. I really am trying to convince myself to put it up to at least a D tier, but I'd feel bad for Cinderella then at that point. It is, these two, they're such good stands, they're such really good stands, but in terms of what we class as a stand and, you know, the overarching thing for JoJo with it's got to be combat effective and stuff like that, they've got to be F tier, I'm afraid. Next we have Rat, and Rat is a bloody strong stand. I'm going to put it at B tier. Darts that melt your flesh and make you immovable, and the fact that, you know, a rat controlling the stand Rat with 2 T's can nearly beat Joe. I know Joe Tro was, you know, he was probably doing it as a lesson for Josuke, so we can't take that. But I mean, that rat really put up a bloody fight, and that's a rat with a pea head. Imagine if, you know, a human had the stand Rat. I know this must be getting confusing with me keep saying rat, but, you know, if you gave Rat to a more, I'd say competent, but, you know, a more human stand user, who would have thought it could have probably gone up to, you know, A tier, maybe even pushing S tier. It's a good strong stand. Next we have Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Red Hot Chili Peppers easy into A tier. It's such a strong stand, you know, it's incredibly fast, so fast indeed. The fact that even when it's not boosted by consuming energy, it's still, like, I bet even a non-powered up Red Hot Chili Peppers could beat Highway Star, and then let alone when it can, you know, if it gets a power grid going, it consumes all that energy, it can, you know, pushing up to S tier against these three really. But because it you know, it relies too heavily on electricity and the fact that it needs that power up, you know, if you're in a circumstance where there wasn't active power supply about, it's still strong, but I don't think it competes with these three up here. Well, I'll put it up in S tier. I was about to say, I'm not going to class Sheer Heart Attack as its own stand because it's more of like a sub-stand of Killer Queen, but we'll put that in S tier. So what we've got next is Stray Cat. Stray Cat is a pretty versatile stand. I'm tempted to put it in B, but I think I'll put it in C. Very versatile offensively and defensively. Obviously it can make bubbles that are invisible to the naked eye. It can, you know, which will pierce your flesh. It can form bubbles in your veins that will pop your veins, you know. It can even use a bubble to defend itself against attack. So it's a pretty versatile stand, and obviously you pair it up with, spoilers ahead if you've not watched part 4, but if you haven't watched part 4 while you're watching this video, then when it pairs up with Killer Queen, that is a deadly combo right there. But I mean, as a standalone stand, if that makes sense, a standalone stand, it's C tier. Next we have Superfly. Superfly I'm quite a fan of. Superfly's going to go into B tier. I know a lot of people would put it higher, but for me it's one of those things. Obviously it doesn't give the initial impression that it's a stand, but it's the whole fact that if you fall for its trap of walking into it, you then can't get out. You know, it deflects or attacks back. If you try and leave, you just become a part of the tower. That's super strong, you know. But it's one of those things. It's a building. It can't move about and stuff like that. So it's relying on you to fall into its trap than it actively chasing you. And I think because of its, you know, lack of range, if you want to put it like that, it's strong. Don't get me wrong, but it's not really mobile enough to do any damage unless you fall for it. So B tier I think is fair for Superfly. Next we have Surface. Surface for me, I would put it in F tier, but let's put it in D tier. It's not completely useless as a stand. It just mimics anything it sees, and if it locks eyes with you, it can also control your movement and stuff. That's only if you lock eyes. Yeah, I wasn't too impressed with Surface. I feel a bit generous giving it D tier. It's a pretty borderline useless stand. Not much else to say on that. Pretty bad stand, D tier. Next we have the hand. The hand I'm a big fan of. I really want to put it in S tier, but it's going to be an A tier. The hand's actual ability to, you know, swipe away matter and it could just make anything disappear, and the fact that you can just swipe away blank space even and teleport itself closer is, well, it's borderline broken, isn't it? Let's be honest, it's an incredibly strong ability. And I know Red Hot Chili Peppers says it was a quote-unquote slow stand, and it was slower than Crazy Diamond, but is it as slow as we're led to believe? I still think it's a pretty fast stand. It's just, you know, in comparison to Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is an ultra fast stand, you know. Yeah, to Red Hot Chili Peppers it probably does look slow, like. But I think overall, I think the hand isn't as slow as we're making it out to be. But obviously, I still think it couldn't compete with the stands above it. That's my only thing. I'm trying to judge it that way. That anything, you know, if I thought, oh, it could potentially beat Killer Queen, but not Crazy Diamond, or it could possibly beat Crazy Diamond, but not Killer Queen, I'd put it in S tier. But I don't think it could beat anything above it. But it would beat everything easily below it. So I'm going to put the hand in A. And last, but very not least, is the lock. It's F tier. It's a stupid stand. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.